But let's turn to the story that's breaking this evening. There's been an India Today impact on the Mumbai fake vaccination mystery case. That's right. Within hours of India Today reporting how 390 residents of a Mumbai cooperative society colony, Hiranandani Society upmarket colony, suspected being administered fake jabs, the Mumbai Municipal Corporation has ordered a high-level inquiry in the matter. The Deputy Municipal Commissioner will be heading the probe into the matter and will submit a report within 48 hours. If there is any foul play or irregularities, the BMC itself will file an FIR in the matter. Crucially, this is not just, according to sources, restricted to one cooperative society. Many more societies and even film production houses could have been affected by this, and top hospitals now have ordered internal inquiries because there is a belief that this began in some of Mumbai's top hospitals. That's where someone decided to scam the system. Now let's tell you exactly what's happened. The lens is on the vaccination camp that was carried out in an upscale Mumbai society after residents questioned whether they had actually been given the right jabs. 390 people took the vaccine. Not a single person had any side effects. Hospitals involved have denied providing vaccines to the housing society, leaving the suspicion that the residents could have been given fake COVID shots. At least 2 of those hospitals, India Today learns, have ordered internal inquiries. It's our top story today because today it's Mumbai, tomorrow it could be anywhere else. Take a look.
This is Mumbai's upscale Hiranandani Estate Society. On May 30th, 390 people living here were given Covishield shots inside the society premises. What happened next was baffling. None of the 390 people given the vaccine had any post-jab symptoms, like a mild fever or an ache in the hand. There were more surprises to come.
390 लोगों को वैक्सीनेशन दी गई थी उस दिन ऑन रिकॉर्ड, और हमसे 1260 रुपया लिया गया है. हमें बोला गया था 1200 रुपया ये इसका वैक्सीनेशन का चार्ज है और 60 रुपीज़ GST है. वहाँ पे किसी को पिक्चर्स लेने नहीं दे रहे थे कि भाई आई एम वैक्सीनाइट, और तो वो जो वहाँ पे स्टाफ था वो भी बोल रहा था सेल्फी और हमारा भी फोटो आपको नहीं लेना है.
The people living in the high-end society grew more suspicious after nobody received the certificate issued by the government.
We are seeing after like the day of vaccine, no one is having any side effects, no one is having any terms of, symptoms, nothing in that sorts. So in terms of that, then we started questioning, we started wondering what is going on. So after that, after inquiring, we got to know that no one was getting certificates also, which was supposed to be issued within the first 10-15 minutes of getting the vaccine.
After 10 days, they did get the certificates. But these had the names of different hospitals in Mumbai.
सर्टिफिकेट जो बाद में तो वो तो डिफरेंट नेस्को से आ रहे हैं, लाइफलाइन से आ रहे हैं, हमको आ रहे हैं नानावटी से आ रहे हैं.
नेस्को तो बीएमसी के अस्पताल.
वही जब नेस्को का सर्टिफिकेट आया तब यह सरप्राइज कि ये तो फ्री का और बीएमसी का है, ये कैसे मैनेज हो रहा है. इट मींस इट्स अ वेरी बिग गेम कि ये सब वैक्सीनेशन तो मैनेज हुआ है पर सर्टिफिकेट भी मैनेज हो रहा है.
Then came another twist in the story. The hospitals, which included the city's top ones, denied to have given any vaccine doses to be administered to Hiranandani Estate Society members. Anxiety and anger has gripped the members. They are not even sure what vaccine was given to them.
300 people have taken this vaccine, maybe more than that. 390 people have taken the vaccine. Okay, so we want to know first the authenticity कि क्या गया है हमारे body में. The first and foremost. Second, we need the government intervention on this.
सर्टिफिकेट जो आते हैं जनरली गवर्नमेंट के सर्टिफिकेट जो आते हैं वो 15-20 मिनट में या विद इन 1-2 आवर्स आ ही जाते हैं, एट द मोस्ट 24 आवर्स. बट हम लोग को किसी को भी कोई भी सर्टिफिकेट नहीं आया. जो भी सर्टिफिकेट्स आए किसी को 1 हफ्ते के बाद, किसी को उसके बाद.
After India Today's report from this upscale society, the BMC has ordered a probe. The Deputy Municipal Commissioner will lead the investigation and submit a report within 48 hours.
The BMC officials are also taking the certificates which have been issued to some of the society members and will also speak to the CoWIN app and the nodal officers of the central government. Most importantly, if there is any irregularities in this whole case, BMC themselves will be filing an FIR with the Mumbai police regarding this case. With camera person Prashant Bhatt, this is Saurabh Bhaktania in Mumbai for India Today.
So a possible Mumbai vaccination scam there, which could, as I said, happen in any part of the country. Now, sticking to vaccines, here is the other big controversy. Remember, on the 13th of May last month, the centre increased the gap between 2 doses of Covishield from 8 to 12 weeks and decided to push it to 12 to 16 weeks. A move that experts say was to address the temporary shortage of doses. The government, though, insisted it was based on scientific data. But now it is becoming apparent that some members of India's leading technical advisory group on vaccinations claim the decision was taken without their approval. So did the Modi government go ahead with this decision because there was a shortage of vaccines or scientific data? Sneha Mordani reports.
The union government's decision to extend the gap between 2 doses of Covishield vaccine is now under a cloud. A few members of the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization have claimed the panel's decision was to keep the gap at 8 to 12 weeks. News agency Reuters quoted 3 other members of the panel, Dr. M.D. Gupte, Dr. Matthew Varghese and Dr. J.P. Mulyal, as saying the members had not backed widening the gap. Incidentally, the head of the NTAGI had justified increasing the gap to 12 to 16 weeks in an earlier interview to India Today.
My own understanding is, because there is shortage of vaccine, government will definitely like to see if we increase the duration between the 2 doses, then to get more people vaccinated. It is supposed to be something like 76% efficacious. And therefore, if they increase the duration or restrict to only single dose, they are still able to achieve what we want to do with maximum coverage.
There is absolutely no concern. We, as our horizon of people who are receiving vaccine is increasing, we would like the maximum benefit, and that is the reason that committee revisited the whole interval schedule and decided to increase it to 12 to 16 weeks. So it is not just sparing the vaccine strategy. It is a technical reason that we would like our population to be best protected in the current scenario.
But experts say this is the time to do a rethink.
The current gap of 12 to 16 weeks has 2 problems. First, it leaves people with 1 dose exposed to the risk of severe COVID with Delta variant during that period. The second problem is that it promotes the development of further mutations and new variants. Now that defeats the very purpose of vaccination for both individuals and for society.
Given the new evidence has emerged, it is time for India to consider reducing the vaccine dosage interval from the existing 12 weeks and beyond to somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. This is more important to prevent hospitalization and deaths in the vulnerable, which mainly comprises of elderly and those with comorbidities, irrespective of the age.
Politics has also erupted over the issue, with Congress MP Rahul Gandhi hitting out at the government. Union Health Minister Harshvardhan claims no decision was without unanimity. Politics aside, sources within the government have indicated that there could be a revisit as far as this decision is concerned, and that the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization will be taking a final call. In fact, Dr. Arora, the head of this group, had indicated earlier to India Today that these decisions would be reviewed from time to time because science around vaccines is still evolving. But questions remain whether this particular decision to increase the dosing gap to 16 weeks was actually bulldozed through. With Pankaj Khelkar, Sneha Mordani in Delhi for India Today.
So was the dosage gap extended under pressure from the Modi government? Is the new dosage gap of 12 to 16 weeks really based on scientific evidence? Is it time to rethink the dosage gap? Let's get straight into that question. Dr. Arvindan Soin, Chairman, Medanta Liver Transplant Institution, is joining me. Also joining me, Dr. Shahid Jamil, Director at the Trivedi School of Biosciences at Ashoka University. Dr. N.K. Arora is someone I spoke to a little while ago, Chairman of India's COVID-19 Working Group of the National Technical Advisory on Immunization. And Dr. Giridhar Babu, Professor and Head, Life Course Epidemiology at the PHFI. I appreciate your joining us, all of you. I want to go to Dr. Arora since I spoke to him earlier, and I began by asking Dr. Arora, did you or your body recommend extending the gap between the two doses of Covishield vaccine from 6 to 8 weeks to 12 to 16 weeks unanimously? Because it appears your body was divided on the issue. What's the truth? Did you do this under government pressure, Dr. Arora?
So we are a group of technical people, and some of the best in the country as far as immunization and vaccination is concerned. There is always these technical issues are discussed, and finally we arrive at a decision. If somebody has any difficulty, they put in their dissent, and dissent is also documented in the minutes, and then it goes to the next level. I chair the National COVID-19 Working Group of NTAGI. Once it is decided in our working group, it goes to NTAGI, which is the main body, and they rediscuss and take a very considerate opinion, which is a larger group. And finally, NECVAC takes it up and makes it a policy. So, and at no point any dissent came for increasing this vaccine interval between two doses of the Covishield vaccine.
No, let's get it clear, Dr. Arora. You are telling me that there was no division, but we've got on record a former director of the National Epidemiology, MD Gupta, saying that this decision was not unanimous, that 12 to 16 weeks is something the government decided. I'm asking you again, sir, was this a decision taken by the government of India to increase the Covishield vaccine gap, or taken by you and other scientists in that body?
No, it was part of our NTAGI minutes, which NECVAC finally endorsed.
So I'm asking you this again because there's a lot of concern that the government increased the gap, Dr. Arora, because there was a scarcity of vaccines. It was not based on scientific data. That's what is the allegation being made. Do you want to clarify once and for all again?
So, Rajdeep, I would like to give you some evidences which indicates the scientific basis of this decision. One, that there are other countries which are using 12 to 16 week interval, including Canada, Sri Lanka in our neighborhood, to say a few examples. Second, that the country today has crossed 26 crore mark, I think, and almost 75% of us who have received the vaccine, a single dose has been given. Third, that there are studies from North India, South India, and other parts which have shown that those who are partially immunized with Covishield or fully immunized, that means 2 doses, the vaccine effectiveness remains very similar between the two. So the PGI Chandigarh study, which came in first week of June, showed 75% vaccine efficacy, and that covered the period of alpha variant, that is the UK variant. And the two, whether you were partially immunized or fully immunized, it was among health providers. The risk of hospitalization and death practically diminished, disappeared. The second study, which has come a couple of days ago from Vellore, South India, which covers the period of Delta variant, again it shows that if you are partially immunized, 61% vaccine efficacy, and if you have received both the doses of fully vaccinated, 65%. So repeated data is showing that in the short run, there is no difference.
Right.
Third, that there is scientific basis for adenovectored vaccines. The response in different settings is very context specific because of the circulating adenoviruses. And so, and the second scientific basis is that if quick doses are given, initially we had asked for a 4-week interval, later on extended to 6 to 8, and then 12 to 16 weeks. That there is scientific evidence that adenovector viruses vaccines is when they are given at quickly, the antibodies against adenovirus vector may decrease the efficacy. And in the original data of AstraZeneca, 4-week was 57%, 8-week was 60%, and 12 weeks was 63%, and more than 12 weeks, from 12 to 44 weeks, it was around 75, 76% vaccine efficacy.
Right.
The next is that primarily this vaccine was envisaged to be a single dose. There are other examples of similar platform-based vaccine, that is Johnson & Johnson, which is also a single dose vaccine. Sputnik, similar vaccine, and now they have come up with a single dose, which is a Sputnik Light, and they say it's about 80% effective. So there is plenty of evidence, and these are complex scientific issues. All of these have been taken into account. We are constantly monitoring, and as a result, to avoid any further difficulty, it's a dynamic process. We have,
sir, I take it, sir,
we are in the process.
Sir, I take it it's a dynamic process. But in the United Kingdom, they have now gone back to 8 to 12 weeks because of the spread of the deadly Delta variant. I ask you, therefore, is that a possibility in India? Are you going to recommend going back to 8 to 12 weeks instead of 12 to 16 weeks or not?
So even when we were taking this decision, there was a lot of discussion whether we should stick on at 8 weeks at that time. So there are no clear-cut guidelines. And I think this ambivalence is amply clear in the decision of Public Health England, where they have reduced the interval only for those above 50 years. And below 50 years, they have not made any changes. I think yesterday or day before yesterday, there is further information that EMA is talking about stopping AstraZeneca vaccine for more than 60 years. So there is a lot of dynamicity, and we are all observing it very closely.
So you're not
it's
ruling.
A dynamic state.
I take your point. You're not ruling out, therefore, the possibility that you may change your decision. I want to ask you one final question. Can you give me an assurance with conviction that none of that, the decision originally in May to move from 6 to 8 weeks to 12 to 16 weeks was not taken under pressure from government? It was taken on the basis of scientific evidence and not on the basis that the government did not have enough vaccines. Am I correct?
What do I say? This is an interpretation from you and everybody else. We are citing scientific evidence, and all of us have our own credibility.
Okay.
The governments are always there, but if technical issues are to be decided somewhere else, then there is no need for us. I think all these decisions, our committee was formed in August 24th or so. Until today, we have had 24 meetings, and tomorrow is 25th meeting. So you can understand how frequently we are meeting and trying to resolve issues by issue. Everything is based on scientific evidence.
Okay.
The rest of the interpretation lies with you.
Okay, that's fair enough. I appreciate Dr. Arora, who was joining us earlier. Let's go widen this. Dr. Shahid Jamil, Dr. Arvinder Soin, Dr. Girdhar Babu, your reactions to what you've just heard. You, Dr. Jamil, first, because you've been questioning the fact that the data is not in the public domain, which has led to the gap being moved from 6 to 8 weeks to 12 to 16 weeks for Covishield? Has the time come to put all the data in the public domain?
No, Rajdeep, the data is largely in the public domain. I mean, there are the different types of data. The decision was originally made based on a Lancet February 19 paper, which was a meta-analysis of 4 AstraZeneca studies. Now, we can argue about the finer points of that study because there was also a half-dose, full-dose study that was part of that meta-analysis. But what Dr. Arora just told us about the PGI Chandigarh study, about the Vellore study, they're all in the public domain. They are available as preprints.
So what's your concern then?
Well, the concern really is that, first of all, the data, original data on which this is based from the Lancet study is really not very rock solid data. So that's one. The second is, if you start looking at the Public Health England studies, against symptomatic disease, you see 33% protection with 1 dose, 67% protection with 2 doses. But as far as serious disease is concerned, hospitalization is concerned, you find 71% vaccine effectiveness with 1 dose and 92% with 2 doses. So if vaccine is in short supply, which it is, then I don't really think it makes that big a difference whether you give your second dose at 12 weeks or 16 weeks. Dr. Arora is right in saying that this is based on an adenovirus, and adenoviruses are very immunogenic. So they will give very robust responses. So that's really not the issue. One issue that we are dealing with right now is this Delta variant. And if you see, UK has also reduced its dosing to 8 weeks in groups that are more vulnerable. So I think it's important that we look at it dynamically. And I'm quite assured by what Dr. Arora has just said on your show, that this is being decided in a dynamic manner. This is not something which is cast in stone.
Right.
That it will be only 16 weeks, and they will look at it. So I hope that as vaccine supplies improve, we will go back to a 8-week schedule based on protection of the most vulnerable.
So that's an important point, the most vulnerable group. Dr. Soin, is that what you're also saying, that move at least for the most vulnerable groups, reduce the gap to 6 to 8 weeks again?
Rajdeep, let me sum up my view on this. So initially, when the dose gap was increased to 12 to 16 weeks, that was based both on logistic and public health sense, as well as the science that came out in the Lancet that said that, the group of patients in the trial that were given the second dose after 8 weeks, whether it was 8, 10, 12 or more, actually had better effectiveness compared to those given it before. So there was science in the government decision, and it also made public health sense. And mind you, if it makes logistic and public health sense so that more people can have 1 dose and protection, that's also science. That's not science. Even though they may have been short of vaccines at that point, it made perfect sense to extend the gap to 12 to 16 weeks, or at least 12 weeks at that point. So I agree with that. However, now what has happened is the Delta variant is the major reason for the second surge and for 90% of the infections in the UK. And there is another study in the Lancet, which everybody's been quoting, which suggests that 2 doses would give a better protection than a single dose. And that's why they have reduced the time gap. So we have to see our own vaccine situation. We have to see our own data. The data that has been purportedly coming from CMC and even Apollo or even at Medanta, we have data like that, has all been with a gap of 4 to 6 weeks. This is all data that happened to healthcare workers.
Should it be only for the vulnerable groups? No, let's be clear. Are you saying 4 to 6 weeks for the vulnerable groups or for all?
No. So, Rajdeep, I'm just saying that the data that's available from India happened in Jan to April. We actually don't have real-world data in India on a gap of 12 weeks and then whether they got Delta variant or not. So I think that, yes, the vulnerable groups should be given it earlier, just like the UK has said, because basically we've been relying on UK data. We don't have our own data on 12 weeks plus Delta variant.
Okay. Understood very, very clearly. Dr. Girdhar Babu, your view, has the time come to review and go back to 6 to 8 weeks or even possibly 4 to 6 weeks?
Absolutely, Rajdeep. This is the time now for reviewing the decision in terms of the interval between two doses. I would want to cite the published results from the US, which show 76% efficacy when the two doses were given 4 weeks apart. And this is a very large phase 3 study published from the US. After that, given the Delta variant, the results have shown that only 2 doses are the ones which will help against hospitalization, Rajdeep. Therefore, if we are serious about preventing hospitalization, reducing the deaths, there is no other alternative other than decreasing the interval between 4 to 6 weeks. So 4 to 6 weeks is what I would recommend for everybody. But if there are problems with supply constraints, then at least for the vulnerable definition, according to me, is not just the 45 years and above, but any person with comorbidity, irrespective of the age.
And another factor, Dr. Jamil, very quickly on that, is the belief that because there could be a third wave in a couple of months from now, God forbid, therefore the faster we move on reviewing the gap, the better it is. Am I correct?
That is correct. And the faster we vaccinate, the better it is. We can't predict when the third wave will happen or what will be the magnitude of the third wave. But we can certainly reduce the magnitude and delay the third wave with vaccination at scale now. This is something we missed in January and February to avoid the second wave. We must not repeat that same mistake again.
I think those are very words of caution and wisdom that are being given by all of you. I hope someone out there in the government is listening. We have some hope that the decision now will be reviewed of the 12 to 16 week gap, and we could go back to 6 to 8 or 4 to 6 weeks. Thank you all very much for joining me here on the news today on that big question of vaccines. From vaccines, we're turning to the political story of the day. An FIR being registered against journalists, Congress netas and others for allegedly provoking communal sentiments, peddling fake news on a day when Twitter has been withdrawn from its legal shield and Twitter's name also has been included in an FIR for the first time. All of this has now brought into focus the entire role of the government's decision to clamp down on so-called social media giants. Take a look.
These images that went viral on social media show a 72-year-old man being assaulted by a group of men. His beard is also cut off as he tries to evade the blows. The incident took place on the 5th of June. 2 days later, the victim, Abdul Samad Saifi, in a Facebook Live with a local Samajwadi Party leader, Umaid Pehlwan, alleged he was forced to chant Jai Shri Ram. The victim's claims were widely shared on social media. The police now say the attack was the result of a personal rivalry. There was no communal angle in it, says the police.
उन्होंने ये बताया कि तावीज़ की वजह से उन्होंने मन में उनके इस व्यक्ति के लिए नाराज़गी थी और ऐसा लग रहा था कि एक विपक्षी के साथ मिल करके ऐसा तावीज़ बनाया गया जिससे जो भी वो व्यक्ति संतुष्ट नहीं था उसके घर में उससे विपरीत प्रभाव निकल के आ रहा था.
They've arrested 3 people, including some Muslims, for the assault. They've also filed an FIR in Ghaziabad against fact-check website Alt News co-founder Mohammad Zubair, journalist Rana Ayub, online news portal The Wire, Congress leaders Salman Nizami and Dr. Shama Mohammad, Maskur Usmani, and journalist and author Sabah Naqvi. The FIR also includes tech giant Twitter, on which tweets with the video were shared. The charges range from provocation to cause a riot to attempt to outrage religious feelings and criminal conspiracy that attract up to 3 years in jail. The FIR against Twitter comes even as the site loses protection under the Information Technology Act for consent posted by users after it failed to comply with the government's IT guidelines within the deadline. This means Twitter would be treated as a publisher and its employees will be liable for punishment.
We gave them the last goodwill gesture. Please do. Comply. Otherwise it will have consequences. When they said within a week we will do it, they did not do so.
The FIR in the Ghaziabad case reveals what Twitter could face if it doesn't get the protective cover those social media intermediaries enjoy. The larger question, is the government cracking down on fake news, or is it a clampdown on Twitter that has defied the government many times in the past? Bureau Report, India Today.
So is the government really clamping down on social media websites, or is it clamping down on fake news? Is the government selective in its crackdown? Joining me on the political face-off, Gaurav Bhatia, the BJP spokesperson, Pawan Kheda, the Congress's spokesperson. To you, Mr. Bhatia, first. Is this a crackdown on fake news or a clampdown on Twitter? What happened in Ghaziabad is one of numerous instances of similar fake news about hate speech being put out, of wrong images being put out. But I want to understand from you, Mr. Bhatia, how do you see the government's action? Is it a clampdown or a crackdown?
So, Rajdeep, there are two aspects to it. First of all, the incident itself. And freedom of speech is very vital, but at the same time, it is not absolute. You cannot incite violence. And for a journalist, you call them so-called journalists, they have a duty also to check the facts. I have in my hand a very clear press release from Ghaziabad police. And what did it say? It clearly mentioned that this is not a communal crime. Rather, it is a crime between certain individuals.
Sir, can I just stop you for a moment, because I want you to answer. Sir, just a minute. This was subsequently what you're saying. The Ghaziabad police says it was not a communal crime. But originally, every newspaper in the country website reported it. That was the original report. But the police has cracked down on selective individuals and selective sites. That's the concern at the moment, that these new laws which lift the legal shield will be used selectively to crack down against those who are seen to be anti-government. Your response?
Rajdeep, I hope I'll not be interrupted, because it is not fair on your part.
Go ahead. I just wanted to give
change
context.
the goalpost. Okay, now don't interrupt me for 2 minutes. Okay. And I think I'll make my point very clearly. Okay. Yeah. So let me tell you, I was pointing out, this was even prior to any of the newspapers reported this crime. And what was essentially said, the Ghaziabad police made it very clear that the attackers or the accused persons belong to the Hindu as well as the Muslim community. Those who have been arrested also belong to both the communities. And there is no communal tinge to it. But leaders like Rahul Gandhi, they come out, they invoke Jai Shri Ram ka nara, Prabhu Ram ye nahi sikhate, all that, making it communal. Asaduddin Owaisi goes a step further to say that this is Hindutva Gundagardi. Would he have the courage to say Islamic Gundagardi? Second point, I have in my hand the original complaint given by the victim. Nowhere does it mention that he was forced to chant Jai Shri Ram 1 and 2, that he was forced to shave off his beard. But I am not getting into it. All that I am saying is there are improvements. The investigation is going on. But let me say one thing very clearly. The media has a very onerous responsibility of reporting after doing a fact check. I know of your tweet and your statement when on 26 Jan, farmers were protesting and they reached the Red Fort. And you said and I am quoting from your tweet. One person, 45-year-old Navneet killed, allegedly in police firing at ITO. Farmers tell me the sacrifice will not go in vain. Now, Rajdeep, I will only ask you, this tweet of yours is inflammatory, is inciting people, and it could lead to losing precious human lives.
Mr.
So
Gaurav
would you
Bhatia,
say this?
Mr.
Please,
Gaurav Bhatia,
Rajdeep, don't interrupt me.
No. You see, sir, you have made your point. You are claiming that those tweets are inciting.
No, I'm asking you something.
No, I have used
Can
the
I
word.
ask you a question?
Sir, that matter is already in the court. I am happy to answer any question. I use the word allegedly. My point is, and this is precisely a reporter in a live situation is reporting an evolving situation.
So you should check your facts.
So are you telling me that all those who are pro-government, who have been spreading hatred for the last several years, no government has ever acted against them or the police? You will act in this one case because it suits you.
You will respect my right to ask you a question.
No, sir. This is not.
Allow me.
Sir, I am the anchor. Let Pawan Kheda listening to you.
Yes.
Pawan Kheda, here is Gaurav Bhatia saying, look, if there is any whiff of a fake item, inflammatory, which can incite, like he claims the Ghaziabad story was, where allegedly the person was attacked because he was not chanting Jai Shri Ram, the police says that's not the case. Should those be arrested? And therefore, Twitter doesn't have the legal shield, nor do those individuals have anymore, is what Gaurav Bhatia says. Free speech has its limits.
Rajdeep, I'll give you two examples. One, my own tweet. I can't mention about that tweet because now it's sub judice. This government asked Twitter to pull it down because it went against this government. Twitter didn't even ask me, didn't bother to ask me. They just informed me by a mail that the government of India wants this tweet to be pulled down. I've dragged Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad and Twitter to the court. Let the courts decide. Now I compare this example with the example of what the BJP did. Forged our letterhead, created fake content. Did the government of India act against those in the BJP who faked that content on our letterhead? No. What did Twitter do? On Sambit Patra's tweet, they said manipulated content. Look at the double standards of the government. The government decides that Pawan Khera's tweet has to be pulled down. The government decides that the act of faking content on a forged letterhead of the Congress done by the BJP, nothing has to be done about it. Can you trust a government which shamelessly follows these double standards?
So what is your concern now that the legal shield has been lifted?
That's what in fact, I just said it, I'll repeat it. My concern is, we cannot trust this government with being fair. For them, everything is dissent. Everything that a word you utter against Mr. Narendra Modi and his government, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the students, whether it's the opposition, whether it's the media. I mean, I won't even give you the example of Gauri Lankesh, from a journalist getting killed because she very vehemently spoke out against a particular ideology, to journalists losing their jobs. Either you lose your life or you lose your job. You definitely lose your freedom to write. You definitely lose your freedom to dissent. You definitely lose your freedom to criticize this government.
So you believe that these new laws will mean that anyone who criticizes this government is now vulnerable? You're claiming that this law can be easily misused. You're saying yes.
What I'm saying is, let the courts decide. Let the government not decide. If the courts decide that Pawan Khera's tweet has to go, I am happy. Who is the government to decide that?
You know that
because the same government tolerates tweets by Kapil Mishra, the same government tolerates tweets by all kinds of hate mongers in the BJP and the right wing. What has the government done with those tweets?
I'm
not even asking you what
let
the
Gaurav Bhatia respond. Gaurav Bhatia, the fear is that the hate mongers will get away. You're using this one instance in Ghaziabad to try and target those who are anti-government. As I said, all mainstream media also carried it. There's no FIR against them. It's very selectively done, and that's the fear. This new law, or the freedom that the government or police now has, will be used selectively to target individuals or organizations who are perceived as anti-government. You're not trusted to defend free speech. When your own party is full of, when people close to you are hate mongers, you won't act against them, will you?
Rajdeep, I have a request. I'll first respond to Pawan Bhai, and then I will ask you a question and take the discussion forward in relation to Twitter. Now look at the hypocrisy. He gave 2 examples. I'll also give 2 examples. He says, let the court decide. So how did Twitter decide that Sambit Patra's tweet was manipulative? And Chhattisgarh police registered a case against Raman Singh ji, former chief minister, and Sambit Patra. And do you know what the court has decided? They've stayed their arrest and the proceedings. That's what the court has done.
That's one. Second,
you are a journalist. I want to ask you, Rajdeep, tell me, Arnab Goswami, I know he's one of your colleagues, but I ask you, what about his freedom of speech and expression and the right to report? Are you with him or not? I'm asking you.
I am fully with all journalists, including Mr. Goswami. No, 1 minute, sir. But I am with all. The problem with, sir, the problem is just a minute, sir. The problem is I stand up for Arnab Goswami and I will stand up for a journalist who is seen to be anti-government, who exposes the government and has an FIR and sedition charges filed against them. Are you going to stand up against both? You tell me. You stand up against both.
I'm not done. Rajdeep.
I stand up for both. I stand up for any misuse of state power, sir. Any misuse of state power.
So,
I'm being clear.
Let me make my point, and I am.
No, I am asking you now. Will you stand up for the journalists who have exposed misuse in Uttar Pradesh and have FIRs filed against them or sedition charges against them? Will you stand against them, for them? Tell me, please.
I will. Rajdeep, now I hope I'll get some.
No, answer it.
So, I am answering.
Sir.
I am answering. I am brave enough, just like you. I know the questions that you posed to Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi so bravely. I will also answer.
Sir, again you're making it personal. I am willing to show all my interviews in the public domain. I have nothing to hide. I am not a politician who hides things.
So let me know when I have to speak.
I asked you a question. Will you stand up for journalists who speak out against the government?
So can I respond now?
Yes, please.
So, Rajdeep, I commend you first of all admitting that Maharashtra government was vindictive. There was vendetta against Arnab Goswami, and that is how they curb the right to freedom of speech. I will answer your question.
For Arnab Goswami, there are hundreds of anonymous journalists who are being targeted in this country, Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, that you are clueless about.
Why are you getting agitated?
No, because you are clueless. I'm asking you this.
I'm answering your question.
Will you stand up for other journalists?
If you listen to me, you don't want to listen to me.
No, I'm asking you a question, dear.
I am answering the question, dear.
Please.
Suniye to meri baat.
Boliye.
Any journalist who's targeted by the government, whichever government it might be, if a court says that he is being wrongly targeted, I will respect it.
Okay.
I say that with utmost responsibility. But now let me make my point for Twitter.
Very quickly.
Twitter is a company. It is not above the law of the country and the constitution.
Agreed.
There were rules.
Agreed.
They got enough time. They did not implement that. Why did they not comply with the rules? And third, is it not important that Twitter should have verified the facts? Either they are an intermediary and they don't judge any tweet, or they start judging and then start accepting responsibility for judging these tweets which are on their platform.
Okay.
And last but not the least, if Kangana Ranaut's account can be suspended, why have they not suspended the accounts of Sabha Naqvi and this Rana Ayub?
Sir, have you seen some of the comments that Kangana Ranaut has made? Have you seen what she says? Anyway, Pawan Kheda respond. The fact is, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Is this about Twitter or is this about your belief that there is selectivity in the way things are done? Let's end it there.
First of all, when you call Congress, let this not be a debate between you and the BJP. Let us also get our fair chance.
Fair enough.
For every Arnab Goswami who was caught red-handed peddling influence, celebrating the deaths of our brave hearts, there is a Supriya Sharma who was exposing the pitiable conditions of a village in Domri. There was an FIR lodged against her by the UP government. There is a Pawan Jaiswal who did the Namak Roti story. There was an FIR done against him by the UP government. There was a Manish Pandey who was a News One journalist. STF picked him up. Why? Because he spoke about the bad condition of the PPE, quality of the PPE. There was an Amitabh Rawat, all UP. Now, this is a party which does victim shaming in Kathua and Unnao. Do you entrust them with my freedom of speech? Do you entrust them with democracy for God's sake? Look at what the Delhi High Court said yesterday. It came cracking down on the BJP.
So it's a lack of
Such
trust.
An anxious government.
No, can I respond
So it's the
to that
trust deficit. No, I'm afraid it is a question of a trust deficit that exists. That is the question I think that needs to be addressed. If the government can address the trust deficit question, I think people will respect what the government does. The proof of the pudding will lie in the eating. We will wait and see whether the government will act against those who have spread hate over the last few years and whether those are also acted against. Gaurav Bhatia, Pawan Kheda, as always a pleasure talking to two fine spokespersons of their parties. Let's take a break. When we return,